You know what they say, it takes two to tango. And of course, two heads are better than one. But have you ever heard of the principle, takes two to make one, when it comes to flip clocks? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. What we're looking at is a Panasonic RC-7021, and they called it the Maywood. And in 1972, the Maywood went for $39.95, which is about $250 in today's dollars. And you know what else I found in that newspaper in 72 was the movie Deliverance was brand new in the theaters. Where does the camping trip end and the nightmare begin? We know where it began. Anyway, what we've got here is a flip clock that someone wanted me to help restore. And we've got a lot of issues with this. And often on flipclockfans.com, people ask me, well, where do you get parts for a clock? And what you got to do often, very often in fact, is to get another clock. So we've got, this is the internals of one clock. And then on the, we're going to go over this and see which one's best. And then we're going to take parts from the two to make one good one. Now what I have done already on this clock on the left here is I've removed a lot of the electrolytic capacitors. Those are the ones I've already removed. And people who restore mechanics from the 70s say you've got to take out all these capacitors and replace them. The reason being that after 10 or 20 years they're going to start messing up. They're not going to be exactly right. So what I did is I went to a place called DigiKey, and on their website you can actually order just one of everything that you need to get your project going again. So you look through here, you can see all these things that look like tin cans here. Those are the capacitors, and what they do is they hold a charge, sort of like a battery, to smooth out the electronics. Now that one here, that's an old one. That's the last one that needs to be replaced. And when you have to replace these, you kind of have to chase down where the leads go to. Now there's a positive and a negative side of all these capacitors because they're direct current. So they're going to be on separate pathways or traces on the back of your board here. So you've got to find ways to find out where exactly that capacitor went into. And when just that speaker's in good shape. We'll go ahead and use that speaker for this project. Mostly I'm going to use these whole internals here and then use parts and pieces from the other parts of the clock. This is the top, and I think I'm going to use that top, but if you look at this bottom, someone has decided to etch a number in here so that some criminal wouldn't take their clock, I suppose, as if that's going to stop somebody. But it's going to stop us from using this bottom. We're going to use the other bottom from the other clock. But anyway, as far as the capacitors, many restorers have told me if you're not replacing these, you're not doing a full restoration. So this is actually the first time I've done that, because for me, I'm not real big on the radio portions anyway, and none of these have anything to do with the clock. So here's the replacement capacitor for that one, and you'll see that there's one leg longer than the other, and the shorter leg is a negative. And that's going to be something important if you decide to tackle something like this yourself. If you put this in backwards, it's going to pop. It's going to kind of do a little mini explosion here. So you have to figure out which way that is oriented. In this case, the negative is pointing towards your antenna here, that long bar. That's the AM antenna. So I have to remember that. So when I remove this and replace it, I've got to put it in the right way, or we're going to have some issues. Now, I'm not an expert at this. This is actually the first time I've done it, but what I'm doing here is I'm heating up the top leg here. And what you don't see me doing is on the back side, I'm pushing downwards towards the table, downwards, to try to rock that out. So as I push that down, it's pulling that one leg out. And then I'll switch and then heat up this leg over here. And I'm going to be pushing upward towards the ceiling. So if you can imagine, I'm rocking that capacitor back and forth. And I can feel it coming out. and you walk it back and forth like that, it's probably the easiest way to get that out, because what you don't want to do is mess up all these traces, or you don't want to overheat the components that's on the board. Now it's almost out, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and grab a hold of it with my tweezers here and get the last leg out. Now probably I should secure the board onto something, and so I don't want to hit that cord over there, that dial cord. If I hit that with my soldering iron, that's just going to snap it immediately. So I'm pulling on that, giving it some pressure, and I really should have secured that board, but I think I got it that time. And we pull it out just like we're pulling out a tooth. You see here, this one, of course the legs are equal because they've trimmed them back, but this one has a nice stripe there, shows the negative side. And we make sure you have to spot that. Now you can get a schematic that'll tell you, but I didn't have a schematic to this one. Now if you look here, it says 10 microfarad. It's 10 and like a U symbol and an F. It's 10 microfarad and it's 10 volts. You need those two to match up. So this one is the same thing, 10 microfarads at 10 volts. This one doesn't have a real definite stripe on it, but like I said, that shorter leg is my negative, and that's going to have to go towards, it'll go towards that front of the circuit board, or towards that bar. You won't have to wonder if you've put it in wrong for very long once you power it up. It'll let you know. So I found my holes, and I think one of them actually I still have a patent hole, or an open hole. And what you do is you're going to kind of put pressure on it from this side. So you get it in there, the one hole that's still closed. I'm going to put my leg in there, I'm going to put pressure on it, and as I'm applying pressure, I'll heat it up on the back side and make that leg come through. So again, that's right there is the one I've got to heat. So you can see this is kind of a little tedious process of replacing these. It's fun in its own way. It's kind of like a puzzle in that sense, but it is kind of nerve-wracking because anytime that you cross these traces, you could have a problem, and that's where this schematic would come into play. Because if you accidentally do that, you might not know you've done that, and you can cause some serious issues. Now, in my case, I have the other clock. I can double check and make sure I didn't screw something up. So I'm going to heat that, and you should see that leg pop through in a second. There it goes. Just see we got that leg through, and then it's just a matter of getting the other one positioned so that it goes through too. As you can see, when you get a clock restored fully like this, why it would cost the amount of money that it does. You know, I think people underappreciate how much a restoration of a piece of equipment like this should cost. We've got a couple good restorers on flipclockfans.com, and they're not making millions of dollars doing this, but so the charges involved are because of the work it takes. So I take these leads and I kind of tighten them down there, and I'll solder them, and then we'll go ahead and trim off that excess. And that's what I've done to all of these beforehand, and you can see there's many of them. And back up in there, it was ridiculously hard because I didn't want to take off this part here, and I had to be careful not to hit anything there, but taking that off was going to actually be more trouble. So I took my time and got everything right and didn't have to disassemble so much. So that's kind of it if you want to tackle that kind of problem. And I was just going to show you that because it's something I've never really done on the videos before. Now the other thing in this clock, and this is a very common thing when you look at your clocks, is that's the volume there, and it's called a potentiometer. And a lot of times that is screwed up, and in this case it's not. But here, this is the AM/FM selector, and believe it or not, often when a clock doesn't work, it's that. It needs to be cleaned. Now this is the tuner dial there. You can see that string moving that thing back and forth just to dial in the clock. But so that's pretty much it. We did all that. We got the two clocks together, cleaned everything up, and made one good one out of it. I thought you might be interested in that.
your pleasure with Double Mint Gum. Double good, double fresh, double smooth, double delicious.
Double splashing, double dashing, double sailing on a sunny day. But the single most favorite double in the world is double good, double mint gum.
Double your pleasure with Double Mint Gum.